Hello everyone, Sientir here with another Rambler for you, and this week is the next one in the Sins series, the Seven Deadly Sins series, and it's the fan favorite Lust. Fan favorite is a little bit of a joke, but there's a couple of important things that I need to kind of do first. Well, one really important thing basically, which is to kind of define what I'm talking about when I talk about lust. It's a difficult concept to pin down a little bit because lust as a word in the English language means a huge quantity of things. It usually means a desire for something that is considered inappropriate or incorrect. It can be, a word that's in Greek, probably going to butcher this pronunciation, epithymio, something like that, is translated to lust often, and that kind of means like a forbidden desire, something along those lines. But this concept of lust can be used in a broad mini context. Of course, it has a sexual overtones pretty heavily. So when we talk about the concept of lust, what we're usually doing is we're either using it in the context of a desire that we have that we think is either a bad idea or, that we think is either a bad idea or something that is considered to be bad to want, or it's some sort of like sexual desire. So for example, when somebody says they're lusting for a car, they probably don't mean that in a sexual sense, but they probably mean it in the sense of they think it would be a bad idea for them to actually get it, but they really want it. So it can be very murky because we use it in that sense of, I don't think I should have that thing, but I really want it anyway. So just clearing all of that out. So there's another concept of lust, which is kind of, it's going in that sexual direction that's almost more noun-like. So to say that somebody has lust or is lustful, that sort of thing. And that's not necessarily where I'm going either. I'm going to talk about something that I would call kind of an illusory mental state of lust, probably next week, is separate of this. But for this week, what I'm going to specifically talk about is I see lust as a description of wanting intimacy, that it desires intimacy, but it doesn't go about it the right way. So I need to take a moment to define what I mean by intimacy, because it's another word that means a lot of different things. So like, physically, this would be sexual activities, kind of like the height of physical intimacy. But there are other types of intimacy as well. And it's kind of a knowing type of intimacy. This type of intimacy is emotional, it's intellectual, or spiritual even. And I think that this can be pursued through things like gossip. So gossip magazines can go to this. The other thing that, as I was kind of thinking about and kind of pre-processing this to make sure I knew what I wanted to say in a rough sense, is that lust, to my mind, tries to get intimacy safely. Because true intimacy, it's a two-way street. It's reciprocating. So to have true relational intimacy with somebody, you have to be in a relationship, and you have to be vulnerable with each other. You have to be mutually vulnerable. And what I think we ultimately want and crave is to fully know while being fully known. To know the deepest aspects of someone else and to have the deepest aspects of ourselves known. And to still be in a loving relationship of trust and that sort of thing. Which is kind of a tall ask on the part of the person desiring this intimacy because it requires an incredibly large amount of vulnerability. You have to be very vulnerable with the person, very trusting of yourself with someone, and that's very scary. So what lust tries to do is take away that vulnerability and create a feeling or an illusion of closeness by accepting the other person's vulnerability, but refusing to allow its own vulnerability. To me, this is what lust does, at least in the Seven Deadly Sins sense of how I'm using the phrase, where the motivation is this intimacy, that feeling, that true sense of intimacy, but what lust does is it's scared of the vulnerability, and so it goes after that intimacy from an emotional and a personal distant standpoint, and that isn't actually the thing that we're wanting. And this is where lust gets very dangerous, in that it presents something that kind of gives a hit towards what we want, kind of like a drug, where it's like, oh, this is the closeness that I crave, and it kind of gives a hit of that, but it doesn't actually deliver, so it's not satisfying in a long-term sense. And so what's required is to continually get those hits, and that's where people will chase things like gossip, or chase things like pornography, or adultery, or any of those sorts of things. Chase sexual relationships because they can give a sense of intimacy, but they can also be done in a way that has a certain amount of distance, right? And that distance is what lust wants to be able to feel safe. So those are my general thoughts on it. I also want to address kind of a different thing, which is there's an opposite of this, which is expressing of the vulnerability. So things like exhibitionism or telling all about yourself, telling a lot about your personal story, that sort of thing, which is kind of, I would say it almost falls into the opposite end of this, of wanting that intimacy and trying to fling yourself out there in hope that somebody will catch on or care or whatever. There's a lot in that. I'm not sure how much it falls into lust per se versus like goes against social standards. So that's a kind of a related topic that I thought I'd bring up, where I feel like some of the exhibitionist stuff, especially when it comes to nudity, gets thrown into lust when it's not necessarily a lust-oriented behavior per se, if that makes sense, but can often be driven from other desires. So I just kind of wanted to mention that while I'm here on this topic. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here because I don't have a whole lot more to say about it without just going in circles, and I don't think we want me to go in circles now, do we? So until next time, you can contact me by emailing me directly at sientir@gmail.com. You can like me on Facebook at facebook.com/SientirsRamblers, and you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Sientir. Actually, another way that you can support me that I might as well add while I'm here and thinking about it is you can share the content that I make with people. That's by far the thing that, in many regards, will help the most. I don't have a good way of saying, hey, everyone who wants my content, here it is. But you might know people who do want the things that I make. So if you let them know, that actually helps quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and close there. So take care, everyone. Bye-bye.